Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. Divorce laws vary significantly by state and jurisdiction, and the historical context provided here is intended to illustrate cultural shifts rather than provide a roadmap for individual legal strategy. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with a qualified attorney licensed in their specific area before making any decisions regarding family law or domestic litigation. We are not responsible for any actions taken based on the content of this deep dive. In the year 1915, the average American man viewed the concept of divorce not as a legal right, but as a public execution of his character. At a time when the flickering lights of the silent screen were just beginning to illuminate the dark corners of the American psyche, a transformation was occurring that would forever alter the trajectory of the American male in the courtroom. You have been told that the modern divorce crisis is a product of the late 20th century, a result of the no-fault revolution of the 1970s. But the truth is far more complex and far more cinematic. The seeds of the modern family court system, and the specific challenges men face within it today, were sown in the Nickelodeons and grand movie palaces of the early 1900s. While men were watching the first action heroes on screen, the legal and social definitions of fatherhood, provision, and cruelty were being rewritten in the background. If you feel like the system is rigged against you, it is because you are playing a role in a script that was written over a century ago. Today, we are going to tear up that script by examining the historical trends of early U.S. cinema and how they birthed the modern matrimonial landscape. By understanding the origins of these archetypes, you will gain a level of clarity that most men never achieve, allowing you to approach your own situation with the cold, calculated precision of a historian, rather than the emotional turbulence of a protagonist. The problem facing the modern American man in a divorce scenario is often a lack of historical context. You are navigating a system that feels irrational because you are viewing it through a contemporary lens. You see a landscape of asset division, custody battles, and alimony as a modern invention. However, when we look at the silent film era, the period from roughly 1894 to 1929, we see the exact moment the provider archetype was codified into the American imagination. In early films like The Crowd, or the domestic dramas produced by D.W. Griffith, the male figure was depicted with a very specific set of expectations. If he failed to meet these expectations, the cinematic narrative demanded his punishment. This transition from the agrarian family unit to the industrial cinema-influenced nuclear family changed the way juries and judges viewed the abandoned wife. This video solves the problem of legal blindness by showing you how the tropes of the 1910s became the statutes of the 2020s. We are going to break down why the victim-slash-villain dynamic in early cinema created a historical trend in family law that still prioritizes maternal custody and paternal financial obligation. To understand where we are, we must look at the transition from the 19th century patriarchal model to the early 20th century companionate marriage model. In the late 1800s, divorce was rare and required proof of extreme misconduct, such as adultery or physical battery. However, as the motion picture industry began to dominate American culture, the narrative shifted. Early cinema began to explore the new woman, a figure who sought emotional fulfillment and independence. Films like The Cheat, 1915, or Manslaughter, 1922, began to depict marriage not as a permanent contract of survival, but as a romantic endeavor that could, and perhaps should, end if happiness was not maintained. This shift in storytelling mirrored a shift in the law. Case studies from this era show a gradual increase in mental cruelty as a grounds for divorce. For the modern man, this is the origin point of the subjective standard. In the early 1900s, a man could find himself in court because he didn't provide the lifestyle depicted in the glamorous films his wife saw on Saturday night. Today that same pressure exists, amplified by social media, but the legal foundation remains the same: the expectation of the male as the infinite resource. Consider the historical trend of the gold digger trope, which found its footing in the silent era. Characters portrayed by actresses like Mae Murray or early vamps like Theda Bara created a cultural conversation about women who married for status and divorced for profit. While these films were often intended as cautionary tales for men, they actually served to cement the idea of separate maintenance. Before modern alimony, there was the concept that a man must maintain his wife in the station of life to which she had become accustomed. This was a direct result of the urbanized cinematic dream of the early 20th century. Men in the US today are often shocked by the lifestyle analysis performed during divorce discovery. They shouldn't be. This is a 110-year-old legal carryover from an era where the cinema convinced the public that a woman's social standing was a property right that the man was obligated to fund, regardless of the marriage's viability. We also need to discuss the tender years doctrine, a legal principle that emerged in the 19th century, but was popularized and reinforced by the sentimentalism of early Hollywood. Early films frequently depicted the mother as the sole emotional anchor of the home, while the father was either a distant provider or a source of conflict. In the masterclass of this video, we will examine how the visual language of cinema, the way the camera lingered on a mother's face versus the way it framed a father's departure, influenced the best interests of the child standard. This standard is often touted as gender-neutral today, but historical case studies suggest it is deeply rooted in the Victorian-era sentimentality that was preserved in amber by early U.S. filmmakers. When you enter a mediation room today, you are not just fighting against your spouse's attorney. You are fighting against a century of visual propaganda that suggests men are secondary parents. The importance of this historical deep dive cannot be overstated. Most divorce help for men focuses on the immediate. Change your passwords, hide your assets, or find a shark attorney. While those tactics have their place, they are reactionary. A masterclass approach requires you to understand the social engineering of the American family. In the 1920s, the divorce rate in the United States doubled. This wasn't a coincidence. It was the result of the first generation of Americans who grew up with the cinema as their primary moral compass. The Hollywood divorce became a cultural phenomenon, with stars like Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks redefining what it meant to end a marriage. Their public split in the 1930s was the culmination of a decade of cinematic shifts that made divorce a tool for personal reinvention. For the modern man, understanding this means realizing that the legal system is designed to facilitate transitions, often at the expense of the highest earner. As we move through the subsequent parts of this series, we will look at the specific data points from the 1910s and 1920s regarding property settlements. We will see how the innocent spouse concept evolved into the no-fault reality we see today. We will analyze how the depiction of the deadbeat dad in early morality plays on screen created the aggressive enforcement mechanisms of the modern child support services. This is not just a history lesson, it is a tactical briefing. By seeing the gears of the machine as they were being built, you can learn how to avoid being crushed by them. We are going to look at actual court transcripts from the 1920s that read like film scripts, proving that the law follows the culture. Potential outcomes for your own case will improve when you stop treating your divorce like a tragedy and start treating it like a production where you finally understand the director's intent. Stay with me because in the next section, we are going to dive into the specific silent film archetypes that are still being used to categorize men in family court today. The silent screen did not just provide entertainment, it provided a visual shorthand for moral judgment. If you are sitting in a conference room in 2026, across from a mediator or a guardian ad litem, you are being viewed through a lens that was polished during the Wilson administration. The first and perhaps most damaging archetype we see is the villainous heavy. In early U.S. cinema, characters played by actors like Erich von Stroheim often portrayed the aristocratic, cold, and emotionally unavailable husband. He was the man who had everything but gave nothing of himself. In the 1920s, as the companionate marriage model gained traction, this cinematic villain became the legal template for the cruel husband. Imagine if you are a high-earning professional today, perhaps a software engineer or a medical specialist. You have worked 60 hours a week to provide a lifestyle for your family, but in the courtroom, that work ethic is reframed. You are cast as the villainous heavy because your absence from the home for work is translated into emotional neglect. The historical trend here is clear. The law began to prioritize the quality of the emotional bond over the quantity of the financial contribution, but it never stopped demanding the financial contribution. Let us look at a specific case study from the 1920s that echoes into the current year. The divorce of Charlie Chaplin and Lita Grey in 1927 was not just a tabloid sensation. It was a watershed moment for how men are categorized in the public and legal eye. Grey's legal team released a 50-page complaint that was essentially a film script, painting the world's most famous comedian as a domestic tyrant. They used the power of narrative to transform his public persona, the lovable tramp, into a private monster. This set a precedent for what we call the narrative ambush. Today, a man named John in 2026 might find himself facing a similar strategy. John is a dedicated father who has never had a legal blemish on his record. However, during the discovery phase of his divorce, he realizes that his every text message, every late arrival from the office, and every disagreement over a vacation destination has been cataloged. His spouse's attorney is not just presenting facts, they are building an archetype. They are trying to cast John as the modern version of the silent film villain. The second archetype is the bumbling provider. This was perfected by the likes of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin in his more sympathetic roles. This is the man who is fundamentally incompetent at domestic life. He cannot cook, he cannot soothe a crying baby, and he is constantly overwhelmed by the simple mechanics of a household. While this made for great slapstick comedy in 1915, it became a lethal weapon in the hands of family court judges. The historical trend shifted toward the tender years doctrine, which assumed that men were biologically and temperamentally unfit to care for young children. Even now, in 2026, while the law is technically gender-neutral in most U.S. states, the bumbling provider archetype persists in the subconscious of the court. If a father cannot recite the name of his child's pediatrician or the exact dates of the spring break schedule, he is immediately filed under this archetype. The court does not see a busy man. It sees a man who, like a character in a silent short, is hopelessly out of his element in his own home. To combat this, you must understand the step-by-step process of recasting yourself. Step 1 is the audit of perception. Look at your life through the eyes of a silent film director. If there were no dialogue, only your actions, what story would the camera tell? If the camera only sees you leaving at 7 a.m. and returning at 7 p.m., you are a ghost in your own narrative. Step 2 is the documentation of presence. In 1920, a man had no way to prove he was a good father other than his wife's testimony or the word of a neighbor. In 2026, you have digital footprints. You have school portal logins, doctor visit confirmations, and extracurricular photos. Step 3 is the refusal of the script. When the opposing counsel attempts to provoke an emotional response, they are looking for a specific frame for their movie. They want the angry shouting man. If you remain calm, stoic, and factual, you break the archetype. You become the heroic lead. A character early cinema reserved for the man who protects his family and maintains his dignity under pressure. Imagine if you could see the judge's bench as a film critic's desk. They are looking for consistency, character development, and a clear arc. If you show up to court one day as the bumbling provider, unsure of your facts, and the next day as the villainous heavy, aggressive and demanding, the critic will give you a failing grade. You must maintain a singular, positive archetype throughout the entire production of your legal case. This is not about being fake. It is about being intentional. Early cinema taught us that the audience believes what they see more than what they hear. This is why showing the court your involvement in your children's lives is 10 times more effective than telling the court you are a good dad. Historical trends show us that the concept of alimony or spousal support was originally designed as a safety net in a society where women had few economic opportunities. In the silent film era, a divorced woman was often depicted as a tragic figure, cast out into the cold. Think of the 1920 film Way Down East, where the protagonist is literally caught in a blizzard after being shamed by a man. This visual imagery created a deep-seated cultural urge to protect the displaced woman at all costs. While the economic landscape for women in 2026 is radically different, the legal mechanisms for alimony still operate on these 100-year-old emotional triggers. When a judge looks at a financial affidavit, they aren't just looking at numbers. They are subconsciously reacting to the historical image of the woman in the blizzard. Your job is to provide the data that refutes this outdated imagery. You must show the modern reality of dual income potential and individual agency. The deep dive into early cinema reveals that the winners in these historical divorces were the men who understood they were in a visual medium. They managed their public image with the same intensity that they managed their businesses. In the upcoming parts of this masterclass, we will examine the specific plot twists that can occur in a modern divorce and how to navigate them using the tactics of the greatest cinematic strategists. We have only scratched the surface of how these archetypes govern your life. There is a specific legal phenomenon known as the cinematic blur, where a judge's personal bias, shaped by a lifetime of media consumption, begins to override the actual evidence presented in the room. If you do not know how to identify the blur, you are walking into a trap that has been set for over a century. But how do you actually dismantle a 100-year-old archetype when you are in the heat of a custody battle? How do you stop the court from seeing you as a bank account and start seeing you as a parent? The answer lies in a strategy used by early film editors known as the Kuleshov effect. a technique that proves the audience provides the meaning between two images. If you can master this psychological tool in your legal filings, you can change the entire meaning of your actions without saying a word. In the next part, we are going to reveal exactly how to use the Kuleshov effect to frame your evidence so that the judge is forced to see the version of you that wins. We are moving from the history of the screen to the strategy of the courtroom, and the next revelation will change the way you look at your own legal documents forever. The Kuleshov effect is the most powerful psychological tool in the history of visual storytelling, and yet most men entering the family court system in 2026 have never heard of it. Named after Soviet filmmaker Lev Kuleshov, who was active during the rise of early U.S. cinema, this principle demonstrates that viewers derive more meaning from the interaction of two sequential shots than from a single shot in isolation. In his famous experiment, Kuleshov took a shot of an actor with a neutral expression and juxtaposed it with three different things: a bowl of soup, a girl in a coffin, and a woman on a divan. Even though the actor's face remained identical in every sequence, audiences praised his acting, claiming he looked hungry, grief-stricken, or lustful depending on what followed his face. In the high-stakes theater of a U.S. divorce, your life is the neutral face, and the evidence presented by opposing counsel is the bowl of soup or the coffin. You are not being judged on your actions, you are being judged on the sequence in which those actions are presented to the court. Imagine if you are a father named Michael in 2026. Michael is a diligent worker who has just finalized a promotion. To celebrate his ability to provide more for his children's future, he purchases a reliable but modern SUV. This is a neutral fact. However, if his spouse's attorney presents this purchase immediately after a testimony regarding Michael's request to adjust temporary spousal support, the Kuleshov effect triggers a specific narrative in the judge's mind. Suddenly, the SUV is not a tool for the family. It is a symbol of Michael's alleged financial narcissism and his desire to prioritize luxury over his children's needs. The sequence creates the meaning. Michael is not being evaluated on his financial stability, but on the narrative montage created by the juxtaposition of his success and his request for fairness. To navigate this, you must stop thinking about your evidence as a list of facts and start thinking like a film editor. The historical trend of the narrative ambush began in the early 1920s with the tragic case of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. At the time, Arbuckle was one of the highest-paid stars in Hollywood, known for his innocent, bumbling screen persona. In 1921, he was accused of a crime during a party in San Francisco. Despite being acquitted in 3 separate trials, the final jury even issuing a formal apology to him, Arbuckle's career was obliterated. The reason was not the evidence but the montage. The Hearst newspapers edited the narrative of the event by juxtaposing photos of Arbuckle's luxury lifestyle with images of the victim, creating a visual language of power versus vulnerability. This case study is the gold standard for understanding how public perception, and by extension legal perception, can be manipulated by the arrangement of information. For the modern man, the lesson is clear. Being right is not enough if the montage says you are the villain. Step by step, you must learn to audit your own montage before it reaches the courtroom. The first step is the inventory of juxtaposition. Take every major fact in your case and ask yourself, what is the worst possible image this could be paired with? If you have a hobby that takes you away from home on weekends, it is a neutral fact. Paired with a testimony about your spouse feeling lonely, it becomes abandonment. Paired with a photo of you teaching your son that hobby, it becomes paternal bonding. You must proactively pair your facts with the correct contextual imagery. Step 2 is the strategic delay. In early cinema, directors learned that timing was everything. If you have positive news to share, such as a raise or a new living arrangement, you do not release that information in a vacuum. You wait to present it at a moment where it serves as a counterpoint to a negative narrative. Step 3 is the neutralization of the reaction shot. In a 2026 courtroom, your physical presence is being edited in real time by the judge. If your spouse is testifying and you roll your eyes, that is a reaction shot. In the movie of your divorce, the judge is the editor, and they will cut from your spouse's tears to your eye roll, creating a sequence that implies cruelty. Your goal is to provide a neutral, stoic reaction shot at all times, making it impossible for the editor to create a villainous montage. We must also analyze the historical trend of the studio fixer. During the silent era, studios like MGM and Paramount employed men whose sole job was to manage the optics of their stars' private lives. These fixers understood that a man's reputation was his most valuable asset. They would often create artificial domestic scenes, photos of stars playing with their dogs or reading by the fire, to counteract rumors of instability. While we do not suggest creating artificial scenes, the principle of active narrative management is essential. In 2026, you are your own studio fixer. This means that your digital footprint must be curated with the same precision as a 1920s press release. Every post, every comment, and every public interaction is a potential frame in the montage. If you are claiming to be a devoted, present father, but your social media only shows you at professional networking events, the Kuleshov effect will work against you. The judge will juxtapose your claim of being a present father with the visual evidence of your professional ambition, and conclude that you are an absentee parent. The deep dive into this cinematic strategy reveals why the traditional legal approach often fails men. Attorneys are trained in the law, not in the psychology of visual storytelling. They focus on the law of evidence, but the court often operates on the law of impression. Case studies from the early 1900s show that the most successful litigants were those who could frame their story within the existing cultural archetypes of the time. In 2026, the archetypes have shifted, but the mechanism of the montage remains identical. You are dealing with a system that has been conditioned by over a century of media to look for the hero, the victim, and the villain. If you do not actively edit your role, the system will edit it for you, and it rarely casts the high-earning male as the hero. Consider the potential outcomes of a case where a man understands the Kuleshov effect versus one where he does not. In the first scenario, the man provides a parenting log that is dry and clinical. In the second, the man provides a parenting log that is accompanied by small, dated receipts for mundane things like kids' toothpaste, a new pack of socks, or a library book. The receipts are the Kuleshov soup. By themselves, they are meaningless. Juxtaposed with the parenting log, they create an image of a man who is intimately involved in the granular, daily needs of his children. This is how you win the montage. You move from being a provider of funds to a provider of care. The cinematic history of the US is not just about movies, it is about the codification of American morality. Early censorship codes like the Hays Code mandated that certain wrongdoings always be punished on screen. This created a cultural expectation that persists in the legal system. Someone must be the bad guy, and the bad guy must pay. If you enter the courtroom without a clear understanding of how to frame yourself as the protagonist of your own life, you risk being cast as the character who must be punished to satisfy the narrative requirements of the court. We are going to look deeper into how these moral codes from the 1920s evolved into the specific legal statutes you are facing today. But what happens when the montage is not just being built by the lawyers, but by the very technology we use to communicate? In the next part, we are going to explore the phenomenon of the digital script. We will examine how the 1920s concept of the paper trail has evolved into the 2026 reality of metadata warfare. You are leaving a trail of frames every single day, and most of them are being captured in ways you don't even realize. I will show you how to audit your digital script, and how to use the same techniques silent film stars used to protect their legacy from the earliest versions of cancel culture. The script for your future is being written right now. It is time you took the pen. In the early days of Hollywood, the most terrifying weapon in a divorce or a scandal was not a gun, but a small leather-bound notebook. This was the era of the paper trail, where a handwritten letter or a stray telegram could end a career and dissolve a fortune overnight. In 1926, the studio systems used a primitive but effective form of surveillance, hiring private detectives to tail their stars and document every movement, every companion, and every late-night excursion. They were building a dossier, a physical script of a person's hidden life. Fast forward to 2026, and the leather-bound notebook has been replaced by metadata. The surveillance is no longer a man in a trench coat. It is the silent, constant recording of your digital existence. This is the era of metadata warfare, and to survive it, you must understand that every action you take is being recorded as a line of dialogue in a script you may not even know is being written. Metadata is the data about your data. In the silent film era, a photograph of a star at a speakeasy was just a photograph. In 2026, a photograph is a container for a hidden narrative. It contains the exact GPS coordinates of where it was taken, the precise second it was captured, the device used, and even the lighting conditions. This is the modern version of the studio dailies, the raw footage that directors review every night to see if the actors are staying on script. If you are a father named David in 2026, currently navigating a high-conflict divorce, you must realize that your digital dailies are being reviewed by an audience that is looking for any reason to recast you as the antagonist. Imagine if David tells the court that he is a present, engaged father who prioritizes his children's bedtime routine. This is his intended script. However, his digital script tells a different story. His Uber history shows he was at a restaurant across town at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. His fitness tracker shows a heart rate spike at 11:30 p.m. His smart home logs show the front door didn't open until midnight. Individually, these are neutral facts. But when juxtaposed using the Kuleshov effect we discussed earlier, they create a sequence that implies David is dishonest about his involvement at home. The historical trend here is the shift from visible evidence to invisible evidence. In the 1920s, you could burn a letter. In 2026, deleting a text message or a location history can be flagged as spoliation of evidence, a legal term that essentially means destroying the script before the director can see it. This can lead to a negative inference, where the court assumes the deleted data contain the worst possible information about you. To conduct a masterclass level audit of your digital script, you must follow a 3-step protocol that mirrors the way early film studios protected their most valuable assets. Step 1 is the metadata inventory. You must look at every device and every account as a potential witness. This includes your vehicle's navigation system, which often stores a history of every destination you have visited. It includes your shared cloud accounts, where photos you thought were private might be automatically syncing to a family tablet. In the 1920s, stars like Mary Pickford had to be careful about who saw them in public. In 2026, you have to be careful about what your devices are saying about you when you aren't even looking. Step 2 is the sentiment analysis audit. In 2026, discovery in U.S. divorce cases often involves AI-driven tools that can scan thousands of text messages and emails in seconds. These tools don't just look for keywords, they analyze tone. They look for patterns of aggression, sarcasm, or emotional instability. This is the digital version of the 1930s Hays Code, the set of industry moral guidelines that dictated how characters were allowed to behave on screen. If your texts to your spouse are consistently typed in all caps, or if you use derogatory language, the AI will tag you as the high-conflict personality. You are effectively failing the modern Hays Code. To counter this, you must adopt the persona of the stoic lead. Imagine every text message you send will be enlarged on a 60-inch monitor in a courtroom and read aloud by a judge. If that thought makes you uncomfortable, the script needs a rewrite. You must use neutral, business-like language. The goal is to make your digital script so boring and consistent that it provides no dramatic material for the opposing counsel to use in their montage. Step 3 is the chronological alignment. Historical trends show that the most successful legal defenses are built on a foundation of unassailable timing. In early cinema, a continuity error like a character wearing a hat in one shot and not the next could ruin a scene. In a 2026 divorce, a continuity error in your timeline can ruin your credibility. If you claim to have been at a specific location at a specific time, your metadata must back it up. We have seen case studies where a man's entire custody argument was dismantled because his LinkedIn activity showed him logging in from an office in a different city when he claimed to be at his daughter's soccer game. He wasn't lying about being a good dad. He was just careless with his digital continuity. The concept of the digital script also extends to the publicity department of your life. In the 1920s, the Hollywood publicity machines would plant stories in gossip columns to shape public opinion before a trial even began. Today, your social media is your gossip column. Even if your accounts are private, the historical trend suggests that privacy is an illusion in litigation. Friends of friends, disgruntled relatives, or even your own children can inadvertently share your digital script. If you are claiming financial hardship while your Instagram story shows you at a high-end golf resort, you are creating a narrative contradiction that no lawyer can easily fix. You are essentially filming a luxury lifestyle movie, while telling the court you are in a gritty realist drama about poverty. The court will always believe the visual evidence over the verbal testimony. This leads us to a crucial historical realization. The law moves slower than technology, but it always catches up. In the 1910s, the legal system was still grappling with how to handle motion pictures as evidence. By the 1920s, it was standard practice. In the early 2020s, the legal system was grappling with social media. By 2026, the legal system is using sophisticated algorithms to predict behavior based on your digital footprint. You are being judged by a system that is increasingly data-driven, yet still emotionally influenced by the archetypes of the past. By auditing your digital script, you are not being deceptive. You are being professional. You are taking control of your narrative in a world that is designed to strip that control away from you. You are acting as your own director, your own editor, and your own publicity department. You are ensuring that the version of you presented to the world is the version that aligns with your ultimate goals. But managing your digital trail is only half the battle. The other half takes place in the most high-stakes environment of all, the financial stage. How did the silent film stars protect their millions when the system was designed to redistribute their wealth? How did they use corporate structures and performance contracts to safeguard their future? In the next part, we are going to dive into the financial stagecraft of the 1920s and how it correlates to asset protection and lifestyle analysis in 2026. We will explore the secret accounting methods of the early moguls and how you can apply those principles to ensure your financial script doesn't end in a total box office failure. The numbers never lie, but they can certainly be misinterpreted if you don't know how to frame them. Get ready to look at your bank statements as if they were a studio's balance sheet. In the silent era of Hollywood, the studio moguls were the first true masters of what we now call financial stagecraft. Men like Adolph Zukor and William Fox understood that wealth was not just a number in a ledger. It was a narrative that could be shaped, shielded, and presented in various ways depending on who was looking at the books. When a star or an executive faced a divorce in the 1920s, their financial records were treated with the same meticulous care as a film's budget. They understood that the court, much like a cinema audience, would react emotionally to the appearance of excess. This historical trend of managing the optics of wealth has evolved into the sophisticated lifestyle analysis used in U.S. family courts in 2026. If you are a high achiever or a business owner, your bank statements are no longer just a record of transactions. They are a storyboard that a forensic accountant will use to reconstruct your life. To master this part of the deep dive, you must first understand the concept of lifestyle analysis. In the modern legal landscape of 2026, especially in high-stakes jurisdictions across the United States, the court looks at the standard of living established during the marriage to determine potential outcomes for spousal support and asset division. This is the direct descendant of the 1920s concept of maintaining a wife in the station of life to which she had become accustomed. Back then, if a producer lived in a mansion in Beverly Hills and threw lavish parties, the court assumed that lifestyle was the baseline for his wife's future needs. Today, the process is digital and far more granular. A forensic accountant will pull 3 to 5 years of records to create a standard of living report. If your records show a pattern of high-end dining, luxury travel, and expensive hobbies, that becomes the mandatory script for your financial future. Imagine a character named Mark in 2026. Mark is a successful consultant who has spent the last decade building a boutique firm. Like the studio heads of the 1920s, Mark often blurred the lines between business and personal expenses. He took clients to 5-star dinners, leased a high-end vehicle through his corporation, and traveled to industry conferences at luxury resorts. In Mark's mind, these were professional necessities. However, through the lens of a lifestyle analysis, these expenses are reframed as personal income. The court sees the $200,000 Mark's business spent on travel and entertainment and adds it back to his personal cash flow. Suddenly, Mark's income, for the purposes of calculating support, is double what he actually takes home in his paycheck. This is the phantom expense trap, and it is a leading cause of financial failure for men in modern divorce. The first step in your masterclass level financial audit is the categorization of costs. In early film production, expenses were divided into above the line and below the line. Above the line costs were the fixed, high-profile expenses like the stars and the director. Below the line costs were the variable, operational expenses like the set builders and the film stock. You must apply this same logic to your household. You need to identify which expenses were essential to the family unit, the production, and which were discretionary or tied to your professional identity. Historical trends show that men who can clearly delineate business-related lifestyle from family-related lifestyle have a much higher probability of reaching a fair settlement. If you can demonstrate that the 5-star dinners were strictly for client acquisition and not part of the daily family fabric, you can begin to lower the standard of living baseline that the court is trying to establish. Step 2 is the valuation of the intangible. In the 1920s, the value of a film studio wasn't just in its cameras and its backlots. It was in its contracts with stars, its goodwill. This became a massive point of contention in early California divorces. How do you value the fame or earning power of a man? In 2026, this has evolved into the complex valuation of professional practices and closely held businesses. If you own a business, the court may attempt to assign a celebrity goodwill or personal goodwill value to your company. This is the idea that the business is worth more because of your specific reputation and skills. To protect your financial script, You must be prepared to argue that your business has enterprise goodwill, value that exists independently of you, which is often treated differently in asset division. This is a direct parallel to how 1920 studios argued that the studio brand was more valuable than any individual actor, a strategy used to keep the star's divorce settlements from cannibalizing the studio's capital. Step 3 is the audit of dissipation. During the silent film era, a man's reputation could be ruined if he was accused of wasting the marital estate on frivolous pursuits outside the home. Today, this is legally known as the dissipation of assets. In 2026, any significant expenditure made after the breakdown of the marriage can be scrutinized. If you start making large investments, taking expensive trips, or giving significant gifts to family members during the separation, the court may add back those funds to your side of the ledger, as if you still had the cash. Case studies from the early 20th century show that many men, sensing an impending divorce, would try to hide assets in overseas accounts or dummy corporations. This rarely worked then, and it is almost impossible now. Modern blockchain forensics and international banking transparency mean that any attempt to hide the script will only result in the court awarding the other side a larger share of the remaining visible assets as a penalty. The most effective strategy is the preemptive production report. Instead of waiting for the other side to characterize your spending, you should provide a transparent, well-documented account of where every dollar went. In the 1920s, the best-run studios had the most detailed accounting departments because they knew that transparency was the best defense against predatory lawsuits. By providing a clear, chronological history of your finances, supported by metadata and receipts, you take the power away from the narrative of excess. You show that you are a disciplined manager of resources, not a profligate spender. This shifts the court's perception from seeing you as a deep pocket to seeing you as a responsible steward of a complex financial ecosystem. Consider the potential outcomes when you treat your divorce like a high-stakes corporate merger rather than a personal tragedy. You move from an emotional defensive posture to a strategic offensive one. You aren't just paying a settlement, you are buying out a partner. You aren't losing your house, you are rebalancing your portfolio. This shifts the psychological weight of the proceedings. Historical trends indicate that when men approach the financial aspect of divorce with the cold, analytical mindset of a 1920s mogul, they are far better equipped to negotiate from a position of strength. They understand that every concession must be traded for a strategic gain elsewhere in the script. But wealth is only one form of power. The most valuable asset in any production is not the money, it's the legacy. For a father, that legacy is his relationship with his children. In the silent era, a man's right to his children was often tied to his ability to provide. In 2026, the battle for custody became a battle for influence. How did the early stars maintain their public image as family men, even when their private lives were in shambles? And more importantly, how can you use the same principles of audience management to protect your relationship with your children from the poisoned script of parental alienation? In the next part, we are going to explore the child of the century. We will look at how the 1920s created the modern concept of the child star, and how that same dynamic is used today to turn children into pawns in a legal drama. I will show you how to identify the signs of scripting in your children, and the tactical steps you can take to ensure your role as a father is never edited out of the final cut. The battle for the heart is often fought in the courtroom, and you need to know the rules of engagement before the first scene is shot. The year 1921 saw the release of a film that would fundamentally change the way the American legal system viewed the role of the child in a broken home. That film was The Kid, starring Charlie Chaplin and a 6-year-old boy named Jackie Coogan. Coogan became the world's first child superstar, a phenomenon that generated millions of dollars and eventually, a landmark legal battle over his earnings. But more importantly for our deep dive, Coogan represented the birth of the child as an asset. Before this era, children in the United States were often viewed through an agrarian lens, extra hands for the farm or the factory. After the silent film revolution, the child became a sentimentalized figure, a symbol of moral purity, and a powerful piece of leverage in the newly emerging theater of high-stakes divorce. When you enter a custody dispute in 2026, you are stepping onto a stage that was built during the Coogan era. The historical trend transitioned from the child as a worker to the child as a psychological trophy. In modern U.S. family law, this often manifests as a phenomenon we call scripting. Just as early child actors were coached by stage mothers to produce tears on command for the camera, Children in contemporary divorces are often unintentionally or intentionally coached to adopt the grievances of one parent against the other. This is not just about badmouthing. It is about the systematic rewriting of the child's internal script. If you are a father, you must understand that the court often views the child as the ultimate unreliable narrator, yet the system is paradoxically prone to the Lumière effect. The Lumière effect refers to the legendary reaction of the first cinema audiences in 1895. When they saw a film of a train pulling into a station, they reportedly screamed and ran to the back of the room because they believed the train was real and would hit them. They could not distinguish between the projection and reality. In 2026, many judges and custody evaluators suffer from a modern Lumière effect. When a child stands before them and recites a scripted narrative, "I do not want to go to my father's house because he is always on his phone," the evaluator often reacts as if that projection is an absolute, unfiltered truth. They fail to see the director behind the camera. They do not realize that an 8-year-old does not naturally use words like toxic environment or emotional unavailability. These are adult lines being delivered by a child actor. Imagine if we look at a character named Robert in 2026. Robert is a mid-level executive who has always had a playful, robust relationship with his 2 sons. However, 3 months into a contested divorce, his eldest son suddenly becomes cold. When Robert attempts to engage him, the boy responds with phrases that sound suspiciously like legal filings. "Robert, you did not prioritize our emotional needs during the marriage." This is a classic case of the scripted child. Robert is devastated, but he must realize that his son is currently playing a role in a production he did not cast. The historical trend shows that when a child is forced to choose sides, they will often align with the parent they perceive as more vulnerable, or the one who is the primary gatekeeper of their daily reality. This is not a reflection of Robert's worth as a father. It is a survival mechanism for the child within the domestic drama. To navigate this without becoming the villain in the child's movie, you must follow a protocol of narrative neutralization. Step 1 is the identification of the adult lexicon. You must document every instance where your child uses language that is developmentally inappropriate. If a 10-year-old is talking about community property or parental alienation, that is evidence of a script. In 2026, you should keep a digital log of these interactions, focusing on the specific words used. Do not argue with the child. Do not try to rewrite their script in the moment. Instead, act as a neutral observer. Step 2 is the use of the independent witness as a background actor. In the silent film era, the most credible scenes were those that felt lived in and natural. In court, your testimony about being a good father is often dismissed as self-serving. However, the testimony of a soccer coach, a math teacher, or a pediatrician serves as the background detail that proves the reality of your involvement. These individuals are the only ones who can provide a counter-narrative to the scripted child. If the child says you are never there, but the coach's attendance log shows you at every practice, the Lumière effect begins to fade. The judge starts to see that the projection on the screen does not match the set list in the real world. Step 3 is the stoic reassurance. Historical case studies of successful paternal custody outcomes in the U.S. suggest that the fathers who win are the ones who refuse to play the role of the antagonist. If you react to your child's scripted coldness with anger or frustration, you are giving the opposing director the exact footage they need to justify a restrictive custody order. You must remain the consistent, calm, and loving protagonist, regardless of the script the child is currently reading. This is the hardest part of the masterclass. It requires you to separate your ego from the production. You are playing the long game, the multi-season arc of your child's life, not just the pilot episode of the divorce. We must also examine the historical trend of the best interests of the child standard. This was established to move away from the idea of children as property, but in practice it has become a highly subjective tool. In the 1920s, this meant ensuring the child had a moral upbringing. In 2026, it often means ensuring the child has emotional stability. The problem is that the court's definition of stability is frequently influenced by the very cinematic archetypes we discussed in earlier parts of this series. The mother is cast as the nurturer, and the father is cast as the disruptor. To overcome this, you must present your household not just as a place where the child stays, but as a secondary production office where life is organized, documented, and stable. Potential outcomes for men who master this understanding of the scripted child are significantly better than for those who react emotionally. By identifying the script, documenting the adult vocabulary, and utilizing independent witnesses, you move the conversation from feelings to facts. You force the court to turn off the projector and look at the actual film stock. You are essentially demanding a behind-the-scenes look at how the child's testimony was produced. The deep dive into early U.S. cinema shows us that the most enduring child stars were those who eventually broke free from their controlling directors and reclaimed their own narratives. Your children will eventually do the same. But for now, you are in the middle of a high-stakes production where the script is being written in real time. You cannot afford to miss a cue. You need to know how to handle the most dangerous scene in the entire movie: the formal deposition and the courtroom testimony. How do you handle a cross-examination when the opposing counsel is trying to edit your words into a confession? How do you maintain your character under the harsh lights of a 2026 courtroom, where every blink and every hesitation is being analyzed by an AI-assisted judge? In the next part, we are going to break down the screen test. We will look at the interrogation techniques used in early Hollywood scandals, and how you can use the principles of method acting to ensure your truth is the only one the court remembers. The trial is the climax of your movie. It is time to make sure you are ready for your close-up. In the year 1927, the world of cinema was shattered by a single sentence uttered by Al Jolson and the jazz singer. Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet." This marked the end of the silent era and the terrifying birth of the talkies. For many established stars of the time, this was not a technological advancement, it was a death sentence. Actors who had built their entire careers on visual poise and silent charisma were suddenly forced to take a screen test for their voices. If their accent was too thick, their tone too high, or their delivery too hesitant, their career was over in a single afternoon. In 2026, every man entering a divorce deposition or a courtroom hearing is facing his own version of the 1927 screen test. You are no longer being judged solely on the silent evidence of your bank statements or your parenting logs. You are being judged on your performance under the hot lights of cross-examination. The historical trend of the legal screen test began with the high-profile Hollywood scandals of the 1920s, where the studio system realized that a star's ability to maintain a character under interrogation was the difference between a box office hit and a total studio shutdown. When Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle faced his 3 trials, he wasn't just fighting a legal case. He was fighting a perception war where every sigh and every shift in his seat was analyzed by a public hungry for a villain. Today, in a 2026 courtroom, that scrutiny has been weaponized by technology. Modern U.S. courtrooms are increasingly utilizing behavioral analysis software that can detect micro-expressions and vocal stress patterns. If you are being deposed via a high-definition video link, an AI-assisted mediator or judge may be looking for the digital markers of deception or instability. This is why you must master the principles of method acting, a technique developed in the early 20th century to help actors find the internal truth of a scene so their external performance remains unbreakable. Method acting, popularized by practitioners like Konstantin Stanislavski during the rise of early cinema, teaches that an actor must not merely pretend to be a character, but must inhabit the character's psychological reality. For a man in a divorce case, your character is the stoic lead. This is not a fake persona. It is the most disciplined version of your actual self. Imagine a character named Thomas in 2026. Thomas is a civil engineer, a man of facts and figures, who is facing a deposition orchestrated by an opposing counsel known for theatrical aggression. The attorney's goal is to provoke Thomas into a reaction: a flash of anger, a defensive shout, or a moment of visible frustration. If Thomas reacts, the attorney has captured the footage they need to paint him as a high-conflict personality. To pass his screen test, Thomas must use the Stanislavski technique of the given circumstances. He must accept that the courtroom is a set, the attorney is an antagonist playing a role, and the goal of the scene is to test his resolve. When the attorney asks a provocative leading question, "Thomas, isn't it true that you prioritize your career over your children's basic emotional needs?" Thomas does not respond with the ego. He uses the 3-second pause. In early cinema, directors learned that the pause before a line of dialogue carried more weight than the line itself. Thomas counts to 3. This pause serves 2 purposes. It allows his own attorney to object, and it signals to the court that he is a man of deliberation, not a man of impulse. He then answers with a neutral, factual statement: "My career provides the stability and resources that allow my children to thrive in their current environment." He does not defend, he defines. Historical case studies from the 1920s show that the most successful stars in the midst of scandal were those who understood the power of the script. In 1936, the legendary actress Mary Astor faced a brutal custody battle where her private diary was used against her. This was one of the first times a personal document was treated like a film script to be picked apart in public. The men who survived similar scandals were those who refused to improvise. In 2026, your improvisation is your greatest liability. Opposing counsel will use open-ended questions to lure you into a long-winded explanation. In the world of professional scriptwriting, we know that the more a character talks, the more likely they are to reveal a flaw. You must speak in short, declarative sentences. You must treat your testimony like a final cut of a movie. Every frame that doesn't need to be there should be removed. Furthermore, we must address the 2026 reality of biometric frame management. Just as early cinematographers learned to use lighting and camera angles to hide a star's imperfections, you must manage your digital frame. If your deposition is remote, your lighting must be professional and neutral. Shadows under the eyes suggest fatigue or guilt. Harsh overhead light suggests aggression. You must maintain eye contact with the camera lens, not the screen. In the silent era, actors look directly into the lens to create an intimate connection with the audience, a technique known as breaking the fourth wall. In a deposition, looking at the lens creates the perception of honesty and confidence. If you look down at your notes or off to the side, the AI behavioral analysis may flag it as a lack of transparency. You are the director of your own screen test. The potential outcomes for a man who treats his testimony as a professional performance are vastly different from one who treats it as a venting session. When you are on the stand, you are not there to tell your side of the story. You are there to provide the specific data points that allow the judge to cast you in the role of the primary or joint custody parent. This requires a level of emotional detachment that most men find difficult. In the masterclass of early cinema, actors were taught the concept of the private in public, the ability to maintain a state of total internal focus while being watched by thousands. You must find that internal focus. You must remember that the person attacking you is a professional whose job is to elicit a specific emotional response. If you don't give them that response, they have no scene. They have a boring movie that the judge will eventually want to fast forward through. Consider the historical trend of the morality clause. In the 1920s, every major studio contract included a clause that allowed the studio to fire a star if they engaged in conduct that shocked or offended the community. Today, the family court operates on an unspoken morality clause. They are looking for the modern virtues: cooperation, emotional intelligence, and a lack of animosity. If you can demonstrate these virtues under the pressure of a cross-examination, you have essentially fulfilled your contract with the court. You have proven that you are a safe, reliable, and predictable character in the life of your children. The deep dive into this cinematic interrogation reveals that the most dangerous moment is not the question you expect, but the one you don't. This is known in scriptwriting as the plot twist. An attorney might spend 2 hours asking you about your finances, lulling you into a rhythm of technical answers, only to suddenly pivot to a deeply personal and unrelated question about your private life. This is a classic tactic used by early 20th century prosecutors to catch a witness off guard. If you have been trained in the method, you will recognize the shift in the scene's tempo and refuse to be rattled. You will maintain your character, take your 3-second pause, and bring the dialogue back to the central theme of your case: the best interests of your children. But even the most perfect performance on the stand can be undermined if the production behind the scenes is falling apart. A movie is only as good as its supporting cast and its distribution network. In the world of divorce, your supporting cast includes your legal team, your expert witnesses, and your social circle. In the next part, we are going to look at the studio system. We will explore how the power structures of the 1920s Hollywood moguls provide a blueprint for building a legal dream team that operates with the efficiency of an elite production house. I will show you how to vet your supporting cast and how to ensure that everyone on your team is working from the same script. The climax of your trial is coming, and you need to make sure your ensemble is ready to deliver a masterpiece. In Part 8, we reveal the secrets of the legal moguls. The studio system of the 1920s was a marvel of efficiency and control, built on the principle of vertical integration. If you were Paramount or MGM, you did not just make the movies, you owned the cameras, the actors, the distribution trucks, and the very theaters where the films were shown. This meant the studio had total control over the narrative from the moment an idea was born until the moment a viewer bought a ticket. In the year 2026, a man navigating a high-stakes divorce must adopt this same mentality of vertical integration. You cannot afford to have a fragmented defense where your lawyer does not talk to your accountant, and your therapist does not understand your legal goals. You need to become the mogul of your own case, building a legal system that operates with the calculated precision of a golden age studio. Let us look at the historical trend of the studio fixer once more, but this time through the lens of team building. In the 1920s, if a star like John Gilbert or Greta Garbo had a personal crisis, the studio did not just send a lawyer, they sent a team. They had a legal expert to handle the courtroom, a PR expert to handle the newspapers, and a security expert to handle the logistics. This is the ensemble cast you need to recruit for your 2026 production. Most men fail because they hire a single actor, the attorney, and expect them to do the lighting, the catering, and the editing. That is a recipe for a box office disaster. Imagine if we look at the character of Stephen in 2026. Stephen is a successful architect whose spouse has just filed for divorce, seeking 70% of his assets and sole custody of their children. Stephen's first instinct is to hire the most aggressive lawyer he can find. But a professional scriptwriter would tell Stephen that an aggressive lead is nothing without a strong supporting cast. If Stephen's lawyer is the director, he still needs a line producer, a forensic accountant who can track the movement of every dollar in his firm to prove that his assets are separate property. He needs a script supervisor, a paralegal or personal assistant who can organize his thousands of emails and text messages into a coherent, searchable database. Without these supporting roles, the director is just shouting into the wind. Step 1 in building your studio system is identifying the lead counsel as your director. In early cinema, a director had a specific style. Some were known for spectacle, while others were known for intimate, gritty realism. You must vet your attorney not just on their win-loss record, but on their courtroom style. Does their style match the judge, who is effectively your primary audience? If the judge is a traditionalist who values decorum and quiet evidence, an attorney who acts like a bombastic character from a 1920s courtroom drama will be a disaster. Historical trends in U.S. family law show that judges in 2026 are increasingly exhausted by high-conflict theatrics. A director who can present a calm, realist drama will often achieve better potential outcomes than one who tries to film an action-packed war movie. Step 2 is the casting of expert witnesses. In the silent era, the right character actor could make or break a scene. In a custody battle, the right child psychologist or vocational expert is your character actor. You need professionals who have massive credibility on screen. They must be able to explain complex psychological or financial data in a way that feels natural and undeniable to the court. Imagine if Stephen hires a vocational expert who can show, through 2026 labor data, that his spouse has the potential to earn a high income based on her degree and past work history. This changes the script from "he must support her indefinitely" to "she is an underutilized asset who can be self-sufficient." This is a pivot that early studio heads used constantly to avoid paying high contract buyouts to stars who were no longer producing hits. Step 3 involves the script supervisor and the concept of continuity. One of the biggest reasons movies fail is continuity errors. A character's drink is half empty in one shot and full in the next. In a divorce, a continuity error is when you tell the court you were at work on Friday, but your smart home logs or toll road transponder show you were at the beach. You need a member of your team dedicated solely to continuity. This is often a senior paralegal. Their job is to cross-reference every statement you make with every piece of digital evidence you possess. They are the ones who ensure that the script you are presenting to the judge is flawless. Historical case studies from the 1920s show that many stars were brought down not by their actual mistakes, but by contradictions on the stand. Step 4 is distribution and the PR machine. In the 1920s, the publicity bureau was the most feared department in Hollywood. They controlled what the neighbors, the friends, and the wider community thought about a star. In 2026, you must manage your social distribution. This means ensuring that your supporting cast, your family, your friends, and even your coworkers are not accidentally leaking spoilers about your case. You need to give them a limited, professional script. If people ask how the divorce is going, the script is, "We are working through the legal process with the best interests of the children in mind." Anything more than that is a risk to your production. Early studio moguls knew that once a story was leaked to the press, they lost control of the ending. The historical data from the 1920s suggests that the most successful studio heads were those who knew how to delegate. Louis B. Mayer did not write the scripts or build the sets, but he knew who the best writers and builders were. In your case, you must act as the executive producer. You are the one who provides the funding and the vision, but you must hire experts who are better at their specific jobs than you are. A man who tries to be his own forensic accountant in 2026 is like a director trying to develop his own film in a bathtub. It will be messy, and the quality will be poor. Consider the historical trend of block booking. In the 1920s, studios would force theaters to buy a block of 20 movies just to get the one big hit. You can apply a similar principle to your evidence. You provide a block of consistent, high-quality good father data points, so that the occasional bad data point, like a missed phone call or a late arrival, is buried in the volume of the production. You are overwhelming the court with the quality of your output. This is how you win the war of attrition that is modern litigation. The deep dive into the studio system reveals that power is not just about having the most money, it is about having the most coordinated team. The moguls of the 1920s were never surprised by a headline or a court ruling, because they had built a machine that processed information faster than their opponents. You are currently building that same machine. You are moving from a state of reactive panic to a state of executive control. You are no longer just an actor in someone else's drama. You are the owner of the studio. But even the most perfectly run studio can be brought down by a single devastating blow to its reputation. In the early 1930s, the double feature became popular, forcing studios to work twice as hard to keep their audience. In your divorce, the double feature is the simultaneous battle for your finances and your legacy. If you win the money but lose your name, the movie is a failure. How do you protect your brand during the most public crisis of your life? In the next part, we are going to look at the contract clauses. We will explore the secret legal protections that silent film stars use to ensure that even if they lost the marriage, they kept their reputation and their future earnings. The final act is where the true legends are made, and you are about to learn how to write a blockbuster ending. The shift from the silent era to the talkies in the late 1920s created a new level of legal complexity for the Hollywood elite. Suddenly, it was not enough to just be a face on a screen. You had to be a voice, a personality, and a brand that could withstand the scrutiny of a public that could now hear you. To protect themselves, the early moguls and stars began to insert specific, ironclad clauses into their contracts. These were designed to safeguard their future earnings and their reputation from the unpredictable nature of the studio system and the burgeoning scandal sheets. In 2026, as you approach the final act of your divorce, you must adopt the same mindset of contractual stagecraft. The settlement agreement you sign is the most important contract of your life. It is the final script that will determine your financial and personal freedom for the next 20 years. If you do not understand the hidden clauses that protect your future, you are essentially signing away your distribution rights for a movie that hasn't even been filmed yet. The first and most critical mechanism is the modern equivalent of the 1930s morality clause. In the Golden Age, these clauses allowed studios to terminate a star's contract for any conduct that brought public disrepute. Today, the historical trend has reversed. In 2026, it is the man who needs to use the morality clause as a defensive shield. This is known as a non-disparagement provision. Imagine a character named Alex in 2026. Alex is a senior vice president at a major defense contracting firm. His professional life is built on a foundation of high-level security clearances and public trust. During a high-conflict divorce, a single emotional post on a social media platform by his spouse could trigger a real-world investigation by his employer's compliance department. For Alex, the divorce is not just a personal matter. It is a direct threat to his career's longevity. A professional non-disparagement clause in 2026 must go beyond the standard language of "don't say bad things." It must be as granular as a 1920s performance contract. It should include specific digital guardrails, the removal of old social media posts, a prohibition on using the children as a mouthpiece for grievances, and a liquidated damages provision. Liquidated damages are the penalties in the contract. Historical trends show that a non-disparagement clause without a financial penalty is often ignored. If the script says there is a $5,000 penalty for every verified disparaging post, the cost of production, for the other side, becomes too high. You are essentially using the same financial pressure early studios used to keep their stars in line. The second area of focus is intellectual property and the protection of future earnings. In the 1920s, Mary Pickford was a pioneer in realizing that her image was a distinct asset from her physical presence. She fought to ensure that her future projects remained her own, even as her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks began to dissolve. In 2026, many men fail to realize that their future earning capacity, especially if they are in tech, creative fields, or business development, is their most valuable intellectual property. The historical trend in U.S. family law has been to look at marital effort to determine what percentage of a business or a patent belongs to the estate. To protect your future, you must clearly define the cutoff date. In early Hollywood, this was the date the contract expired. In your divorce, this is the date that any future growth in your business or your career becomes yours alone. Step by step, you must work with your director, your attorney, to create a property partition that accounts for the blue sky value of your future. If you are developing a software platform in 2026, you must provide data showing that the value of that platform is tied to future innovation, not past marital efforts. Case studies from the early 20th century show that stars who successfully separated their public persona from their private estate were the ones who thrived after the studio system collapsed. You are doing the same. You are separating your future self from the marital unit. The third mechanism is the sunset clause on alimony. During the silent era, alimony was often a life sentence for the man, reflecting a time when women were legally and socially barred from many economic opportunities. However, the historical trend over the last century has shifted toward rehabilitative support. This is the idea that spousal support is a temporary bridge, not a permanent pension. In 2026, you must ensure your script includes a termination event list. These are the specific conditions that end the financial obligation. Beyond the standard remarriage or death, a modern sunset clause should include cohabitation and capacity to earn reviews. If the person receiving support is living in a marriage-like relationship with a new partner, or if they have completed a degree that increases their income potential, the contract should automatically trigger a reduction or termination of payments. This is the 2026 version of a buyout clause in a 1920s talent contract. It ensures that the production has a definitive end date. Fourth, we must look at the life insurance and security provision. In the 1920s, studios would take out massive insurance policies on their stars, known as keyman insurance, to protect the studio's investment. In a modern divorce, the court often requires the man to maintain a life insurance policy to secure his support obligations. This can be a massive hidden cost. To manage this, you must insist on a declining balance provision. As your total remaining obligation for child support or alimony decreases over the years, the amount of insurance you are required to carry should decrease proportionately. This prevents you from paying high premiums for a production that is nearly finished. It is a logical, data-driven approach to risk management that mirrors the way early moguls protected their capital. Potential outcomes for men who master these contractual details are vastly different from those who simply sign the first draft. When you focus on the morality clause, the future IP, and the sunset provisions, you are not being mean, you are being precise. You are ensuring that the ending of this movie is not a cliffhanger that keeps you in a state of perpetual litigation. You are writing a closed-loop ending. Historical case studies prove that the most successful divorcees in Hollywood history were the ones who walked away with a clean contract and their brand intact. Imagine if your settlement is a film premiere. If the contract is poorly written, the critics, the courts, and the public will be picking it apart for years. If the contract is a masterpiece of precision, the premiere happens, the credits roll, and everyone moves on to their next project. This is the goal of the mogul. You are not just ending a marriage, you are settling a partnership and launching a new solo career. The deep dive into these 1930s style protections reveals that the most dangerous part of a contract is what is left unsaid. In the silent era, implied terms led to some of the most brutal legal battles in history. In 2026, you cannot rely on implied fairness. You must have every frame of your future financial life clearly defined in the text. You must be the final editor of your own life story. But there is one final piece of the puzzle. Even with a perfect contract and a winning team, the most important element of any blockbuster is the character arc. How do you personally transition from the divorced man back to the leading man? How do you ensure that the trauma of the production doesn't ruin the sequel of your life? In the final part of this series, we are going to explore the sequel. We will look at how the greatest stars of the 1920s reinvented themselves for the talkies, and how you can use the principles of narrative rebirth to ensure that 2026 is the year you finally step into your most powerful role yet. The final curtain is about to rise, and the audience is waiting for your best performance. In Part 10, we reveal the blueprint for the new life. The silent era ended not with a whimper but with a roar that echoed through every court and living room in America. The transition to the talkies in 1929 was more than a technological shift. It was a total industry purge. The stars who survived were not necessarily the most talented, but the most adaptable. They were the ones who realized that the character they played yesterday was no longer compatible with the microphone of today. As you reach the final scene of your divorce in 2026, you are facing a similar moment of narrative rebirth. You have finished the high-stakes production of the legal battle, and now you are standing on the set of your second act. The historical trend among the great icons of early U.S. cinema, like Joan Crawford or the resilient William Powell, shows that the sequel to a career or a life is often more successful than the original, provided the protagonist understands the blueprint for the new life. To understand how to navigate 2026 as a leading man, we must first look at the concept of the character pivot. In the early 1930s, the public was weary of the over-the-top melodrama of the silent era. They wanted grounded, cynical, yet hopeful heroes who could navigate the complexities of the Great Depression. This is exactly where you stand. You are transitioning from the divorced man, a character often defined by conflict, legal filings, and defensive posturing, to the self-determined lead. Imagine a character named Christopher in 2026. Christopher has just signed his final decree. For 18 months, his identity was tied to being a defendant or a petitioner. His internal dialogue was a loop of legal strategy. To pivot, Christopher must perform a narrative audit. He must stop telling the story of the divorce and start telling the story of the rebuild. In historical trends, stars who continued to talk about their silent era grievances soon found themselves out of work. The audience, which in your case includes your children, your colleagues, and your future partners, wants to see the new character arc. Step 1 in the blueprint for the new life is the physical and digital rebranding. In the 1920s, stars who were shifting their image would often disappear for a few months, only to re-emerge with a new look, a new wardrobe, and a new public persona. They were resetting the frame. In 2026, Christopher must do the same. This is not about vanity. It is about signaling to the world that the divorce production has wrapped. He updates his social media not with single-man cliches, but with images of a man engaged in mastery, new hobbies, professional achievements, and calm, present moments with his children. He is using the Kuleshov effect one last time. By juxtaposing his face with new, positive environments, he forces the community to see him in a fresh light. Potential outcomes for men who engage in this deliberate rebranding include a significant reduction in social friction and a faster reintegration into professional and romantic circles. Step 2 is the establishment of the new studio. For a man in 2026, this means creating a domestic environment that is not a secondary house, but a primary production office for his life. In the silent era, when a star left a major studio to form their own production company, as the founders of United Artists did, they made sure their new set was superior in organization and quality. Christopher's new home must be a bastion of stability. This is especially crucial for co-parenting. The historical trend in U.S. family law shows that parallel parenting is most successful when each home operates as a distinct, high-functioning unit. Christopher does not try to compete with the other parent's production. He simply makes his own production so consistent and reliable that the children feel a sense of absolute security. He sets up new traditions that have nothing to do with the past. These are the original scripts of his new life. Step 3 is the financial sequel. One of the most fascinating case studies from the early 1930s is the career of Buster Keaton. After losing his studio and his marriage, Keaton faced a brutal downturn. However, those who followed his trajectory saw that he eventually reclaimed his status by working as a highly paid gag doctor for other studios. He used his hard-won knowledge to build a new type of wealth. In 2026, your financial blueprint must focus on aggressive recovery. This is the moment to apply the mogul mindset we discussed in Part 8. You are no longer supporting a joint venture that isn't working. You are investing in a solo project. Christopher analyzes his 2026 bank statements not with regret for what was lost, but with a focus on capital efficiency. He uses the data from his divorce, the knowledge of his own spending habits, and the legal limits of his obligations to build a leaner, more resilient financial empire. He realizes that in the talky era of his life, his voice and his expertise are his most valuable assets. We must also address the supporting cast in the sequel. Historical trends show that many stars from the 1920s were brought down by the parasites, who stayed with them after their initial success faded. In 2026, you must audit your social circle. Are your friends still living in the divorce movie? Do they constantly bring up the past, fueling the old fires of resentment? If so, they are bad for your continuity. You need to recruit a new ensemble. Men who have already navigated their second acts, professional mentors, and people who see you as the man you are becoming, not the man you were in the courtroom. This is the studio system for your personal life, ensuring that everyone around you is working from the same forward-looking script. The deep dive into early cinema's greatest comebacks reveals that the most powerful tool for reinvention is stoic silence. Just as the silent stars had to learn when to speak and when to let the camera do the work, you must learn the power of the unwritten scene. There will be times in 2026 when you are baited into the old drama. A text message, a social media swipe, or a comment from an old acquaintance will try to pull you back into the 1920s melodrama. You must refuse the role. By not reacting, you are essentially editing the conflict out of the movie. You are maintaining the high-value persona of the leading man who has moved on to bigger and better things. As we conclude this deep dive masterclass, it is important to remember that the history of the United States is a history of reinvention. From the silent screens of 1915 to the digital landscapes of 2026, the American man has been defined by his ability to survive a crisis and emerge with a clearer vision. You have looked at the archetypes, the legal montages, the metadata warfare, and the financial stagecraft. You have the tools that the early moguls used to build empires from the ashes of scandals. The final curtain of your divorce is not the end of your story. It is the intermission before the blockbuster sequel. The potential outcomes for your future are vast. You are now the director, the writer, and the lead actor. You have the director's cut of your life in your hands. You can choose to frame the coming years as a tragedy of loss, or you can frame them as a masterclass in resilience and rebirth. The audience, your family, your peers, and the man in the mirror, is waiting to see what you do next. The lights are dimming, the projector is humming, and the first frame of your new life is about to hit the screen. But even as you step into this new role, there is one final, hidden layer of the production that most men never see until it is too late. There is a post-credit scene in every divorce, a moment months or years down the line where the system tries to perform a reboot. How do you handle the sudden modification request, or the contempt filing when you thought the movie was over? In our next series, we will dive into the franchise, managing long-term post-decree litigation and the art of the permanent piece. The saga continues, and the most important scenes are yet to be filmed. Keep the camera rolling.